we're in for a treat right now because kicking off with our keynote address is Mr. Steve Rhodes. He's the chairman of the Trendlines group, which is based in Israel and one of the world's leading agri-food venture capital group. Steve himself has close to 30 years in this field, and I think we all know that Israel is well known for the agricultural innovations and inventions. He is going to share with us some megatrends and predictions in areas such as supply chain resilience, food traceability, health-driven products, precision agriculture, and technologies that impact the lives of growers in general. Steve, we're so delighted to have you. Just some admin instructions for everyone. If you look down to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see the chat function and the Q&A function. Now, each speaker will be speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we will open it up for questions. I will kick it off, and I will also be taking clusters of questions from the Q&A channel only. So we will only be taking questions from the Q&A function, but feel free to comment and drop questions and remarks. So drop your comments and feedback and encouraging remarks in the chat function, but all questions in the Q&A channel. And with that, over to you, Steve. Lower the way.
Thank you, Rome. It's really great to be here today, and I'm really pleased that Alan Lai invited me to participate with you today. So thank you very much to Alan. Thank you to Mr. Liu for organizing this, and I very much enjoyed the words of the ambassador as well. So it's great to be with you all today, and I'm looking forward to a very interesting conference over the next couple of days. My name is Steve Rhodes. I'm the chairman and CEO of the Trendlines Group. We're an investment company with operations in Israel, Singapore, and China, focused on developing technologies, companies that will improve the human condition. Because of that focus on improving the human condition, we only invest in two areas. We invest in medical technologies, and we invest in agri-food technologies. And what I'm going to focus on today, of course, is the agri-food part of our business, which is the rapidly growing part of our business, focused on developing new technologies that will improve the way we produce food, lower costs, increase yields, and do it in a sustainable manner. And we're going to talk a lot about sustainability in the agri-food industry today, because that's really, I think, crucial for the future of our industry. When we think about the problem facing coffee and tea and the world in general, the first thing we think about is climate change. It is without a question the biggest threat facing the industry today and facing really any industry for many years to come. Much has been written about the severe deleterious impact of climate change on the coffee and tea industries. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with a lot of the studies that have been done about the effect of climate change on the coffee and tea industry. Just to mention a few of the problems. Warmer temperatures outside of the acceptable range for crops are known to harm plants. As temperatures warm up, it becomes harder and harder for the plants to survive. At the same time, warmer temperatures help pests and diseases to thrive, making it even more challenging to grow our crops. For example, Arabica is highly sensitive to temperature increases, and so can be harmed significantly as temperatures warm. Climate change has caused a decrease in suitable land to grow the species. High mountain plantations no longer have moderate temperatures, and as the temperatures grow, it's going to be increasingly difficult to find areas where we can grow our crops. Unpredictable rainfall is another enormous factor when it comes to climate change and has a huge impact on agriculture in general and on coffee and tea growing in particular. Droughts, of course, can reduce yields significantly. On the other hand, excess rain can also damage plants. It can damage the plants directly while also encouraging the growth of molds and funguses, which do great damage to our plants. Heavier than historic monsoon rains can cause a drop in tea yields. They can also have a huge impact on quality. A couple of years ago, unusually heavy rains in Yunnan, China, resulted in a 50% decrease in some of the most important compounds in the tea, compounds that give that tea its distinct flavor. So we have an enormous problem from excess rain. Not only excess rain and drought cause problems, but also erratic rain causes enormous problems. When rainfall is unpredictable, heavy, light, drought, going back and forth, it can cause coffee cherries to ripen irregularly. And a mixed harvest of ripe and unripe cherries affects the aroma and quality of coffee. As a result of warming, according to some researchers, in the coming years, up to 40 to 55% of arable land for tea production in some regions, most notably in East Africa, could be lost as the temperatures in those regions become excessive for the tea crop. Not only that, but the antioxidant content of tea, which determines its quality as indicated by the story about Yunnan province, is highly dependent on temperature and rainfall. So as quality and quantity decline, we're faced with yet another problem. There's a great tendency, or a greater tendency, and a greater impetus or incentive for some growers or for some players in the marketplace to adulterate the goods entering the market by mixing coffee and tea with other ingredients to try to boost quantities. This is another growing problem in our supply chain. In short, as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has predicted, climate change could reduce overall yields by 20% in the next 20 to 30 years, while having a huge negative impact on quality. Friends, we have a very big problem here that's not going to go away without action by us as important players in the market. But as if things weren't bad enough with climate change, along comes COVID-19. COVID is disrupting markets, disrupting the supply chain, disrupting labor supplies. In short, it's making a mess of things. In fact, typically I get to Singapore at least 6 or 7 times a year. I now haven't been to Singapore in more than 6 months, and I don't know when I'll be in Singapore again. So we see that COVID is really disrupting the way business is done. Arguably, COVID, by the way, is yet another symptom of climate change. At least that's what the United Nations, the World Health Organization, and the World Wildlife Fund have all said, that pandemics are a direct result of climate change. The pandemic has exacerbated many pre-existing problems. It's not that the problems that we're seeing today in the market didn't exist before COVID, but COVID has made them worse and pointed them out. Labor, which was already a huge problem in many parts of the world for coffee and tea growers, is now getting even worse. The pandemic and its ensuing lockdown have put further pressure on the labor markets. In fact, it's estimated that tea production in India will decline by 9% this year due to a severe corona-induced labor shortage at the height, exactly at the height of the harvest season. Corona has also caused severe disruption of distribution channels in some parts of the world. So much so that the United Nations has issued dire warnings about famine risk in many parts of the world. Furthermore, reports that COVID-19 started in the wet markets of China have heightened consumer awareness of food safety issues. Questions about where does your food come from and is it safe? Consumers increasingly demand to know where their food comes from and how it was produced. All of these problems, labor shortages, distribution problems, food safety concerns, these are all problems that existed before COVID, but they've all been brought to the fore by the current crisis and are now things that we really cannot afford to avoid considering and talking about. So what's to be done? That's really the question. Well, the first thing clearly is to combat climate change at the highest possible level. It seems almost too obvious, but nonetheless, I believe it must be said and talked about at every possible opportunity. We have an obligation to ourselves, to our industry, and most importantly, to our children and our grandchildren to promote the transition of our economy such that it places a higher value, the highest value, on sustainability. This is our #1 problem. Although this will sometimes come at the price of a short-term reduction in profitability, none of us can afford a situation in which production goes down by 20% as predicted, while expenses go up as we try to fight the various symptoms of the problem, like drought, increased pests, diseases, and funguses. In the long term, we have no alternative but to fight the battle against climate change. And how do we do that? Well, fortunately, we have technology in the service of the beverage industry and of industry in general to help us. There's a lot that can be done to help to make our industry more efficient and more sustainable. And this is where technology comes into play. To assure the future, and this is the Future Coffee and Tea Conference, to assure the future of coffee and tea production, new technologies are needed to ensure a resilient supply chain. Over the next few minutes, I want to just mention a few examples of innovative technologies that can address some of the problems that we've been talking about today and that we'll be talking about in the days to come. I just want to give you a taste of all that can be done, essentially a tasting menu of technologies that can address some of our problems. Let's start with the issue of water. I talked about rainfall and unpredictable rainfall and drought. There are many technologies that can address the problems of water when we're growing our crops. Drip irrigation, which was invented in Israel over 50 years ago, is the best known solution for precision irrigating of our fields. But eco-pulpers can also be used, resulting in water and energy savings, cleaner water, reduction of wastewater and evaporation, and increased yields. Precision water sensors to improve yields can also be used to reduce water and energy consumption. A great example is our portfolio company, Saturus. Saturus has developed a small stem water potential sensor that's embedded directly into the trunk of a tree or a bush or a vine, telling us exactly and continuously how much water is in that plant and how much water it needs. Today, Saturus is performing a pilot in Brazil, measuring water levels in coffee plants. And we know from studies that we've done that getting the water levels right saves water consumption, saves energy consumption, and actually increases yields and improves the quality of the plant. So water can be addressed. Another area is gene editing and breeding. Gene editing and breeding means improving the plants that we have through technology, using, for example, CRISPR technology to develop drought-resistant, disease-resistant varieties. And while genetic modification can also assist us in getting better yields and better crops, it's often resisted. So we can also use computational biology and computational breeding techniques to improve seed breeding without the use of gene editing or genetic modification. Our portfolio company, Equinome, has developed a yellow pea, for example, that has 50% more protein than other yellow peas, simply through advanced breeding techniques. So certainly breeding is something that can help us a lot. Another thing that can help us is biotechnology. Biotechnology, not just genetic modification, means using natural substances to address our problems. Problems like pests and diseases. We have companies, IBI Ag and Ecophage, that are using naturally occurring nanobodies or naturally occurring bacteriophages to fight insect damage and to fight diseases. These are natural solutions that can go a long way to solving our problems. Another solution is, or question that we need to address is traceability. We talked about food safety and consumer concerns and demand to know where food is coming from. We talked about adulteration and the risk of adulteration as quality goes down and quantities go down. Adulteration can detect and quantify the quality of a plant. Take a look at profile print, which we've mentioned today already. This non-destructive AI food fingerprinting technology allows stakeholders to rapidly authenticate, identify adulteration, and predict taste profiles. Profile print analysis on a molecular level and can be used seamlessly by stakeholders in the supply chain, retrieving real-time results immediately. Another technology that's coming to use for traceability is blockchain, which can be used to allow for traceability, connecting all the players in the supply chain, introducing trust and accuracy into the supply chain. FinTech is going to help growers by giving farmers access to real-time trading prices and trends in the industry, and not just farmers, obviously, but traders and every player along the supply chain. Disintermediation as the result of blockchain and online networks will reduce market inefficiencies. And yield estimation tools like those of our portfolio company FruitSpec, will reduce financial risk in the market by making it possible to accurately predict months in advance the size of a crop in order to introduce more efficiency into the markets. Finally, take a look at precision agriculture. Precision agriculture and the use of big data is rapidly growing to enable us to work at the individual plant level to get great results. Our portfolio company AgriScout uses off-the-shelf drones coupled with their unique artificial intelligence and learning and deep learning to identify pests and diseases in plants rapidly, in crops and fields rapidly, and allow the farmer to only spray those plants that are sick instead of having to spray an entire field. So we save money by reducing the use of chemicals. We improve the sustainability of our processes in doing so. Unfortunately, technology doesn't just grow on trees or on bushes. It has to come from somewhere. The agri-food industry is historically slow to adopt new technology, but it's critically important for the survival of our industry in the future. New technology does not just drop from the sky. It requires careful nurturing and development. Most importantly, it requires the involvement of many players at every level of the ecosystem: growers, suppliers, distributors, investors, banks, government, investors, everyone. Israel is known as the startup nation. This didn't happen overnight. 40 years ago, we had a sluggish, state-controlled economy. The transformation was the result of lots of people saying we can and should do things differently. How did we do it? Well, first and foremost, we have a culture where we question everything. We're willing to question, to criticize, and not to accept the status quo, but rather always saying, how can we do things better? Couple that with collaboration between industry, entrepreneurs, and government, and we have a great recipe for building an innovative culture. Trendlines, my company, is an example of successfully bringing together inventors, capital, and strategic partners to create amazing companies. 57 of them and 9 exits in the last 12 years. I want to call on everyone who's here today to take some action, to participate in solving the problems and addressing the challenges that we face. So I'm calling on you to do 4 things. First, ask how you can practically improve your own impact on the climate. How can you improve the sustainability of your business and your personal life? Second, examine what technologies you can adopt now, today, to improve the efficiency and sustainability of your business and to ensure the long-term survival of our industry. Third, ask, what are the biggest problems facing my business today and how can I solve them? It sounds funny to ask the question, but half of the job in innovation is asking the right questions and identifying the right problems. And once you've identified that problem, number 4, develop your solution to solve that problem. Find a way to develop it and bring it to market. If you can't invent the solution yourself, partner with someone, partner with Trendlines, partner with a friend, partner with another company. There are many partners out there who can help you bring the solutions to market. And there are many investors out there, including Trendlines, who will be happy to evaluate your idea and to consider investing in it. So contact us with your great ideas in Singapore or in Israel. Thank you for inviting me to join you for this historic, first of its kind online conference and exhibition. I hope everyone has a great 3 days at the conference, and please stay safe and healthy. Now everyone, let's go out and innovate. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, thank you so much, Steve. I think we all agree there was a rich mine of insights there. Now again, I want to encourage you, as you're listening to each speaker, including Steve, please start populating our Q&A channel with your questions. We want to answer your questions. It is very rare that we have such a wonderful lineup of speakers from all over the world. Now, Steve, my first question to you then, while we're waiting for questions from the public to stream in, I love how you talked about the sustainability audits. Maybe you could do us a favor by leaving the call to action slide on, the 4 things you can do right now. Sure. I love that. That was great. Now, you know, in industry, we say that which gets measured gets done, right? So quick question today, as consumers, If we wanted to support only sustainable coffee and tea growers and exporters and brands, is there a way to do that right now across the world? And in so doing, we hope to incentivize the growers and exporters themselves to be more sustainable.
I think it's getting increasingly easier. It's still not totally easy to support sustainability, sustainable growers, but I do think it's getting easier. There are international certification bodies that are providing certification on many food products today, highlighting that they have been grown using sustainable methods. There are supermarket chains around the world that are posting information even about the sourcing of their product, where it comes from, and letting the consumers choose between a farm-grown product or in the case of aquaculture, in the case of aquaculture, either farm-grown product or catch from the oceans, which is very non-sustainable. So there are some technologies that are coming along, and as I said, there are technologies like profile print that make it possible to check for adulteration. There are technologies like blockchain that will be used in the future to provide a lot more traceability and the ability to follow where the product is coming from along the food chain, so to speak.
So quick question, some of the countries are a lot more advanced when it comes to maybe being transparent with sourcing, and others may take a while to catch up. How soon do you think this is going to happen? And how soon then do these business owners have to catch up? Because we don't want to be caught in a reactive cycle again.
Right. Well, I don't think business owners should catch up. I think they should lead. I think we have an obligation as business leaders to take the lead in solving these problems and addressing these problems, and not waiting for governments. We know that governments are notoriously slow and open to pressure from many different interest groups. Talk about where are the countries that are ahead of the curve on this. Certainly, there are many Western European countries that are, I think, very advanced in talking about the sustainability of their product. There are parts of the United States that are more advanced than others. I think that it's incumbent on us as business leaders to take the lead and accept responsibility and not to wait for our governments to follow.
I fully agree with you, Steve. But as moderator, I'm going to prod you a little bit, because to business owners right now,
be nice, Romain.
I'll be nice, but you're Israeli, right? You're open to
right. That's right.
Back and forth. So, if I'm a business owner today and I'm grappling with disruption and of course reduced profits, my immediate concern might be economic survivability and increasing my profit margin. So everything you have said so far is wonderful. Traceability, biotech, gene editing, even CRISPR. But to a business owner, they all sound like more and more cost. So again, how do we balance between the short-term and the long-term profitability and continuity of the business? And as someone with experience in fintech and coming from a financial background, what tools or grants or advice can you give people from this region and this industry?
Wow, it's a really good question. The question of balancing the short-term gains with the long-term gains. The bottom line, of course, is that we don't have a choice. When we look at yields going down over time, if we don't address the problems now, even at the expense possibly of some short-term, giving up some of our bottom line in the short term, it's going to cost us very, very dearly in the long term. At the same time, as we discussed in the last question, if as consumers become more and more aware and more demanding of sustainable product, we will actually lose market share if we don't address these issues today. So I think we have a responsibility to do that. There's fortunately also a growing tendency, and this today at least affects more publicly traded companies like Trendlines, but there's a growing tendency on the part of analysts and institutional investors to look at the ESG factors of companies that they invest in, the environmental, social, and governance responsibility of companies. And there are actually large American funds and European funds that are removing their investments from companies that do not score high on ESG scores. So today, even investors are looking at not only what is the short-term profitability of a company, but what is the company's acceptance of its responsibility and its role in promoting sustainability. So all of those things, I think, provide real economic incentives for us to do the right thing, not just worrying about our children and our grandchildren, which is also obviously extremely important, but also the economic incentives are there. And there was a second part of your question, I think.
The second part was related to what we're talking about, which is fintech. And I'm very aware the Q&A, there are questions streaming in, so we will get to those. Thank you for the questions. So the second part of that question was about funding availability if they would like to adopt tech or any of the initiatives you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So there are a number of funding sources available today, and I think that the number of funding sources will increase. There are many governmental units today that are providing incentives, subsidies, financial support for companies to adopt sustainable technologies. There are certainly lots of investors who are interested in investing in the development of new, innovative, sustainable technologies that increase sustainability. I mentioned a number of my portfolio companies that have a huge impact on sustainability. The great thing about all of those companies is that although they increase sustainability, they also improve profitability for the growers. So we're not looking, there's not always a trade-off between sustainability and profitability. A company like Saturus is saving water, they're saving energy expenses, they're increasing yields, and they're increasing fruit quality, which increases obviously the prices that you can get for those fruits. Similarly, a company like AgroScout is reducing the use of chemicals, which on the one hand increases sustainability, but on the other hand reduces expenses for the grower, for the farmer. So there are lots and lots of ways to raise money for innovative technology, and I think that companies and growers who adopt innovative technologies today don't have to assume that those technologies are going to lower their profitability. In many cases, in fact, I would say in all cases, at least in our portfolio, we insist that you not only increase sustainability, but also improve profitability for the grower.
Lovely. So it sounds like sustainability is profitable and you can do good and make good margins at the same time.
I believe so. We are not an impact investor. Our goal is to make money, but we make sure that we do it investing in sustainable technologies.
Wonderful. I think that's music to the ears of many listening in. Now, let me get to some questions here. Let's start with an overarching one by Millet Burgos. Thank you for your question. What technologies would be most useful now to growers and suppliers of tea and coffee that have been affected by COVID-19? So what technologies would be most useful to growers and suppliers that have been affected by COVID-19, specific to the tea coffee industry?
It's an interesting question. One of the first things that comes to mind for me is introducing more and more automation into our operations. We have companies in our portfolio developing robotic systems because labor shortages are a chronic problem in the agriculture industry. Increasingly, people don't want to do the hot, repetitious, hard labor of working in fields and crops. And so there's a big push towards automation, towards introducing robots that can do the so-called heavy lifting, whether it's harvesting, thinning, trimming, pruning plants. And so certainly I think robotics is one area that we can be looking at. It may not be ready today, but I think it will be ready very soon. And there are robots already available in the market to address certain problems of growers across many, many areas. So certainly robotics is one area that I think can be used immediately. A second issue with COVID has to do with the disruption of markets and getting our product to market. I think that here the use of various internet tools can disintermediate and make it easier for growers to address the market directly, going around or bypassing, in some cases, intermediaries, making markets more efficient. I know that here in Israel, there have been many tools introduced just in the last 6 months to make it easier for growers to sell directly to consumers. since many consumers didn't want to go into supermarkets, crowded supermarkets, and run the risk of exposure to the disease. So in many cases, the growers are selling direct to consumers using online tools to disintermediate.
Wow. And on the B2B front, similar technologies?
There are similar technologies that are being developed, certainly, allowing the growers to deal directly with distributors, directly with retailers, and of course, using various solutions to assure quality is also very important. Once you one of the advantages of our existing distribution network is that we don't have to deal, retailers, for example, don't have to deal with hundreds of different growers. They can deal directly through a distributor whom they know and trust. As you disintermediate, although it can be more efficient and save money, it also introduces a lot of questions about where the product is coming from, what the quality is. And so again, something like the profile print technology or blockchain can help trace the product through the growing cycle and give the retailer and ultimately the consumer more confidence about where their product is coming from and that it's safe and been grown in a sustainable manner.
Yeah. Steve, I just wanted to build upon that quickly before we get to Reza's final question. And that is, you talked about growers going straight to the ultimate retailers and the consumer and skipping some intermediaries. But I'm very aware we do have some of these intermediaries here with us today.
Absolutely. I know I'm going to get in trouble.
What is your advice to them? What technologies or mindsets or skills should they start looking at to stay undisrupted and relevant themselves?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think that probably, and again, I'm not an expert here, and I admit it, but my sense is that it's going to be very, very important for them to work in partnership with the other players in the marketplace, to enter into deeper relations with their growers, to see how they can really partner with them in order to create a smoother supply chain. In some cases, adopting new technologies that will provide added value for the growers on the one hand and their customers on the other can also be a big boost to their business and help them be survivable. If they can provide added value, look for that added value, whether it's in the form of branding, it's in the form of technology, it's in the form of quality assurance, and sometimes quality assurance and branding go hand in hand. A company like Intel did a wonderful job years ago of telling everyone they should only buy computers that have Intel chips inside. And if you can develop a brand, a strong brand that says the coffee that I sell is completely safe and sustainable, and you certify it in that way, I think that gives real added value to both to your growers that you work with and to your ultimate customers, the retailers.
Wonderful. So intermediaries have to go towards value creation and maybe aim to become the Intel standard of their industry when it comes to distribution. Now,
Sure.
Steve, we are running out of time, but I wanted to address Reza's question. He says technology is essential for the coffee business right now. Do you do traceability blockchain technology? Coop Coffee right now is focusing with traceability, and how do we get in touch with your company?
We don't have any companies in our portfolio today that directly deal with traceability and blockchain. As I mentioned FruitSpec before, FruitSpec is a company that has a very important role in the food chain, in the supply chain, and the value creation by providing very accurate yield estimation, but it doesn't affect traceability. We would be very interested in looking at technologies related to traceability and blockchain. The best thing to do is to contact Anton Wibowo at our the office in Singapore. He's the head of our Agri-Food Innovation Center, AFIC, in Singapore. His email address is anton@trendlines.com. You can either write to him directly or contact us through our website, trendlines.com. And we'll be very, very happy to look. We are constantly looking for new technologies. We make about 10 new investments every year. So we're very, very open to the new technology.
Out of curiosity, do you get investments every year in new technology out of how many that get pitched to you?
Probably around 500 or 600.
Wow. So you're really getting the best of the best there. At least that's relevant for right
We
now.
we try.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you for the questions as well. We will put those contact details in the chat in case you missed it. So our team will help you by putting it in the chat. And really, please join me in thanking Steve. I think we can all agree you have given us some massive food for thought to really mull over, not just for the short term, but really for the long term. And that we all have a role in fighting climate change because it is going to have an impact on not just our environment, but our profits. So thank you
Thanks
so
very
much,
much.
Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.